July 18, 1943, 9:07 a.m., Camp Hood, Texas. Major John H. Parsons leaned against a concrete bunker wall. The 38-year-old Army Ordnance officer squinted through binoculars at the test range below. A 12-foot-long missile sat on a metal launch rail, its olive-drab fuselage glinting in the Texas sun. Atop the missile, a small, cylindrical capsule housed 3 pigeons, each with a tiny harness and a pecking lever. Parsons checked his stopwatch. In 60 seconds, the missile would ignite. In 90 seconds, the pigeons would take control. He nodded to the technician beside him. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The missile's rocket motor roared to life, belching black smoke. It lurched forward, then lifted off the rail, climbing toward a target 2 miles away, a mock German tank painted white on the desert sand. Parsons held his breath. This was the moment they'd been training for. The moment a pigeon might become the first bird to guide a weapon to its target. The project Parsons oversaw was codenamed Project Pigeon, later renamed Project Orcon, short for Organic Control, to sound less absurd. It was a brainchild of B.F. Skinner, a 39-year-old Harvard psychologist famous for his work on operant conditioning. In 1942, as American forces struggled to hit moving targets in Europe and the Pacific, Skinner had a radical idea. Use pigeons, animals with keen eyesight and the ability to learn quickly, to guide missiles. Traditional guidance systems of the era were crude. Radio control missiles were easily jammed, and early radar guidance was too bulky for small weapons. Pigeons, Skinner argued, were cheap, abundant, and resistant to jamming. They could learn to recognize a target, a tank, a ship, a bunker, and peck at a screen to steer the missile toward it. The Army, desperate for any edge in precision warfare, gave Skinner $25,000 to develop the concept. Skinner's first challenge was proving pigeons could be trained to guide a missile. He set up a laboratory in a converted garage at Harvard, using wooden models of missile cockpits. Each model had a small screen that displayed projected images of targets, tanks, destroyers, factories. The pigeons were placed in harnesses, with their beaks near a row of 3 levers. When a target appeared on the screen, the pigeons were trained to peck the lever that centered the target in the frame. Left lever to turn left, right lever to turn right, middle lever to dive. Every correct peck earned a reward. A tiny pellet of grain dropped into a food tray. Skinner called this shaping behavior, rewarding small, incremental steps until the pigeon mastered the task. The first training sessions were frustrating. Pigeons are naturally skittish, and the loud hum of the projection equipment scared them. Some refused to peck at all. Others pecked randomly, chasing the grain reward without focusing on the target. Skinner adjusted the setup. He covered the lab in soundproofing, dimmed the lights to reduce distraction, and started with simpler targets, brightly colored circles, before moving to realistic images. After 2 weeks, the first pigeon, named Mabel, consistently pecked the correct lever 85% of the time. By the end of a month, Skinner had a team of 12 pigeons that could guide a simulated missile to a tank target with 90% accuracy. He filmed the training and sent the footage to the Army. The generals were skeptical, but they agreed to fund a live-fire test. In March 1943, Skinner and his team moved to Camp Hood, a sprawling Army training facility in central Texas. They partnered with Major Parsons, who had experience with rocket development, to build a prototype missile. The base weapon was a modified M47 rocket, a 12-foot-long solid-fuel rocket that could carry a 200-pound high-explosive warhead 5 miles. Skinner's team added a pigeon capsule to the nose cone, a 10-inch diameter aluminum cylinder with 3 small portholes, one for each pigeon, and a system of levers connected to the missile's control surfaces. Inside the capsule, each pigeon was strapped into a foam-lined harness with its head positioned in front of a porthole. A small screen behind each porthole displayed a real-time view of the ground below, captured by a tiny camera mounted on the missile's belly. When a pigeon pecked its lever, the movement sent an electrical signal to the missile's ailerons and elevators, adjusting its course. The team chose 3 pigeons for the first test. Mabel, a female with a white patch on her wing; Gus, a male with a scar on his beak from a training accident; and Pete, a young male that had shown the fastest reaction time. They trained the birds for 2 weeks at Camp Hood using live targets, old Army tanks driven across the desert, to simulate combat conditions. The pigeons learned to peck the levers even as the training capsule was rocked to mimic missile turbulence. By July 1943, they were ready. The first test flight on July 18th didn't go as planned. The missile lifted off smoothly, but 30 seconds into the flight, the camera feed to the pigeon capsule cut out. Gus and Pete stopped pecking, confused by the black screen, but Mabel kept pecking randomly, trying to earn a grain reward. The missile veered left, missed the target by 300 yards, and crashed into a sand dune. The pigeon survived, shaken but unharmed. Skinner's team examined the wreckage and found a loose wire in the camera system. They repaired it, adjusted the harnesses to reduce turbulence, and scheduled a second test for July 25th. The second test was a partial success. The camera worked, and all 3 pigeons pecked at the levers to center the tank target. The missile corrected its course twice, narrowing the gap to the target. But 10 seconds before impact, a gust of wind pushed the missile off course. The pigeons reacted, but it was too late. The missile struck the ground 50 yards from the tank. Skinner was disappointed, but Parsons saw promise. "The birds worked," he wrote in his report. "We just need to give them more time to correct." Over the next 3 months, the team conducted 18 more tests. They made incremental improvements. They added a 4th pigeon to the capsule to create a majority vote system. 3 out of 4 pecks determined the course, reinforced the camera mount to reduce vibration, and adjusted the lever sensitivity to make the missile more responsive. By October 1943, the success rate had climbed to 60%. The missile hit within 50 yards of the target in 11 of 18 tests. That was better than the Army's current radio-controlled missiles, which had a 45% success rate, but there were still problems. The pigeons grew tired after 60 seconds of flight, too short for longer-range missions. The grain reward system sometimes jammed, leaving the birds without incentive to peck. And the capsule got too hot during flight. Temperatures reached 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the Texas sun, making the pigeons sluggish. Skinner's team addressed each issue. They added a larger grain hopper with a mechanical feeder that couldn't jam. They lined the capsule with asbestos to insulate against heat. They trained the pigeons to work in shifts, 2 birds active, 2 resting, using a timer that rotated which levers were connected to the control system. The improvements worked. In a November 12th test, the missile hit the target dead on, the first perfect strike. The pigeons, Mabel, Gus, Pete, and a new bird named Lucy, had guided it through 2 wind gusts and a slight course correction from the rocket motor. Parsons sent a glowing report to Army headquarters. Project Orcon has demonstrated the ability to hit moving targets with precision. The Pigeon control system is reliable, jam-proof, and cost-effective. But the Army had doubts. Some generals mocked the project as Skinner's folly, arguing that soldiers would refuse to trust their lives to birds. Others worried about the Pigeon's performance in combat conditions. Would they peck during anti-aircraft fire? Would they survive the G-forces of a missile launch? The Air Force, which was developing its own radar-guided bombs, questioned why the Army was wasting resources on bird brains. In December 1943, the Army cut funding for Project Orkan by 50%, forcing Skinner to lay off half his team. Skinner refused to quit. He traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with Army Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall. He brought film of the November 12th test, along with data showing the project's cost, $50,000 so far, compared to $2 million for the Air Force's radar project. Marshall was impressed by the cost savings, but remained skeptical. Can these pigeons work in Europe, he asked. Skinner assured him the birds could be trained to recognize German tanks, ships, and bunkers. Marshall agreed to restore full funding on one condition. The project must demonstrate it could hit a moving ship by March 1944. The team moved to Eglin Field, Florida, a coastal Air Force base with access to the Gulf of Mexico. They modified the missile for maritime use, replacing the tank target with an old Coast Guard cutter painted to look like a German U-boat tender. They trained the pigeons to recognize the ship's silhouette, even as it moved at 10 knots. The first maritime test on February 10, 1944, failed. The missile's rocket motor exploded 10 seconds after launch, killing all 4 pigeons. The second test on February 28th was better. The missile reached the ship, but the pigeons were distracted by seagulls flying alongside, causing the missile to miss by 150 yards. The third test on March 15th was a success. The pigeons ignored the seagulls, pecked the levers to track the ship, and the missile struck the cutter's stern, sinking it. The Army was satisfied. Project Orkan would move to production, but production brought new challenges. The Army ordered 100 pigeon-guided missiles to be used in the upcoming D-Day invasion to destroy German coastal bunkers. But manufacturing the pigeon capsules required precision machining. Each lever had to be calibrated to send the exact same electrical signal, and the camera system had to withstand salt water and sand. The factory in Detroit contracted to build the capsules fell behind schedule. Workers mocked the project, calling the capsules bird cages for bombs. By May 1944, only 12 missiles were ready. Worse, the D-Day planners rejected the missiles. They feared the pigeons would be confused by the chaos of the beachhead, and they didn't want to risk friendly fire if a missile went off course. Skinner's team shifted focus to the Pacific Theater, where the Navy was struggling to hit Japanese destroyers and landing craft. They modified the missile to be launched from PT boats, adding a waterproof capsule and a shorter-range rocket motor for coastal combat. They trained a new team of pigeons to recognize Japanese ship silhouettes, using photos captured by Navy reconnaissance planes. The first Pacific test on July 8, 1944, was a success. A missile launched from a PT boat hit a Japanese landing craft target 3 miles offshore. The Navy ordered 50 missiles, but delivery was delayed by a shortage of aluminum. Most of the metal was going to build warplanes. By September 1944, only 8 missiles had been delivered to the Pacific. They were never used in combat. By then, the Navy had adopted radar-guided bombs that were faster to deploy and didn't require training pigeons. In October 1944, the Army formally canceled Project Orkan. The official reason was technological obsolescence. Newer guidance systems had caught up to the pigeon's accuracy. But unofficially, the project was a victim of its own strangeness. Generals didn't want to explain to Congress why they were spending money on pigeon-guided missiles. Soldiers joked about bird bombs, and the media, when it got wind of the project, dubbed it the silliest weapon of the war. Skinner was devastated. He had spent 2 years of his life on the project, and he believed the pigeons could still save lives by reducing friendly fire and hitting hard-to-reach targets. He offered to donate the remaining missiles to the Coast Guard for anti-submarine patrols, but the offer was declined. The missiles were stored in a warehouse at Camp Hood, and the pigeons were adopted by team members as pets. The full story of Project Orkan remained classified until 1960, when the Army declassified his records. Skinner wrote about the project in his 1971 memoir, Beyond Freedom and Dignity, framing it as a lesson in thinking outside the box during wartime. He acknowledged the project's flaws. Pigeons were never going to replace radar or radio guidance, but argued it had value as a proof of concept. Animals could be trained to perform complex tasks in combat. The pigeons didn't fail, he wrote. The military's willingness to take risks failed. The technical legacy of Project Orkan is more significant than its critics predicted. Skinner's work on operant conditioning for missile guidance influenced later projects. The Air Force used similar techniques to train dolphins for mine detection in the 1960s, and the Navy used sea lions to recover test weapons in the 1970s. The majority vote system, using multiple animals to confirm a decision, was adopted in early robotic systems, where redundancy reduced error. Even the pigeon capsule's insulation and camera mount designs were repurposed for early drones, which needed lightweight, durable components to capture aerial footage. The project also raised ethical questions that still resonate. Was it right to use animals in combat? The pigeons were not harmed in the tests. Only 2 died in accidents, but they were subjected to stress, turbulence, loud noises, confined spaces for a human war effort. Skinner argued that the pigeons were treated better than most laboratory animals, and that their work could save human lives by making weapons more precise. But animal rights activists later criticized the project, calling it exploitative and a precursor to more harmful animal testing in the military. In the decades after the war, Project Orkan became a footnote in World War II history, a strange anecdote about pigeons and missiles. But for the people who worked on it, it was more than that. Major Parsons, who went on to work on the Manhattan Project, called it the most creative project I ever worked on. Skinner's assistant, Margaret Vaughn, who cared for the pigeons during training, remembered Mabel as a smart bird. She knew exactly what she was doing. Even the factory workers in Detroit, who mocked the capsules, later admitted they were impressed by the ingenuity. "We thought it was crazy," one worker said in a 1985 interview, "but when we saw that missile hit the target, we shut up." B.F. Skinner never returned to military research. He focused on psychology, writing influential books on behaviorism and teaching methods. He died in 1990, but his papers, including hundreds of photos and videos of Project Orkan, are stored at Harvard's Widener Library. The remaining missiles were destroyed in the 1950s, but a single pigeon capsule survived, donated to the Smithsonian Institution by Major Parsons. It is now on display in the National Museum of American History, alongside other World War II oddities like a dummy tank and a propaganda leaflet bomb. The exhibit plaque reads, "Project Orkan 1942 to 1940 for a bold attempt to use pigeons to guide missiles. It failed as a weapon, but it succeeded as a lesson in innovation." Major John Parsons died in 1979. In his will, he left a small sum to the American Pigeon Fanciers Association with a note, "For the birds that tried to help win the war." The association used the money to fund a scholarship for students studying avian behavior, a fitting tribute to Mabel, Gus, Pete, Lucy, and the dozens of other pigeons that flew for Project Orkan. Today, Pigeons are rarely used in military projects. Drones and AI have taken their place. But Project Orcon remains a reminder of the desperate creativity of World War II. It was a project born of necessity. When traditional tools fail, you turn to unexpected solutions. It was a project that asked, what if the key to precision warfare isn't a machine? What if it's a bird? The answer, as it turned out, was that pigeons could guide missiles, but they couldn't overcome the military's fear of the unusual. The project was ahead of its time in some ways. It predicted the use of biological systems in guidance, and behind in others, it relied on animals when machines were rapidly improving. But it was never as silly as its critics claimed. It was a serious attempt to save lives by making weapons more accurate, a goal that still drives military research today. On July 18, 2023, the 80th anniversary of the first test flight, a small group of historians and pigeon enthusiasts gathered at Camp Hood, now Fort Hood, to dedicate a memorial. It's a simple stone marker with a bronze plaque showing a pigeon and a missile. The plaque reads, "In memory of Project Orcon 1942 to 1944 and the pigeons that guided the way, innovation often starts with a strange idea. Nearby, a cage holds 2 homing pigeons, descendants of Mabel, according to local legend. They fly around the memorial, circling once before heading back to their cage. It's a quiet tribute to a project that was never given a chance to fly in combat, a project that remains America's strangest World War II weapon. Project Orcon was a failure as a military tool, but as a story of human ingenuity, it's a success. It reminds us that the best ideas often sound crazy at first. It reminds us that even the smallest creatures can play a part in something big. And it reminds us that war, for all its horror, can sometimes bring out the most unexpected creativity. The Pigeon-Controlled missile may have never been used in battle, but it flew where few ideas dare to go, into the realm of the impossible.